All right, so what I would like to do now is I want to present these definitions on the front end. And I want to present them in pairs. Like I want to show the definition and the part of speech. So in this case, there's going to be 8 definitions to show. And I'm going to essentially kind of flatten these definitions out. So I want all the definitions. I don't want to combine these together. I want these to be separated out and then paired with that. Confusing explanation, I know, but we'll figure it out. So we're back. We're going back to page.tsx, back to the front end. First of all, we know it's not data.message anymore. It's data.definitions. So we'll change that real fast. And then we'll put the word here, but actually let's do it below. I'm going to take this out and put it below. And instead of doing it this way with the null check, what I'll do is I'm going to use ternary logic, which means I'm gonna check if the condition is true, and then if it's true, do one thing, if it's false, do a different thing. It's sort of like an if statement, but we can't use if statements inside of JSX. We have to use ternary logic. So we're gonna check if the response does not equal undefined, and then we put a question mark, and then we separate these two out. This is if it's true. This is if it's not true. So in this case, if it's true that it's not undefined, do this. If it's not true that it's not undefined, in other words, if it is undefined, then do this. So we'll take this typography here and put it right up here. So if it's not undefined, we want to show the word, and we'll do this. So it's going to be response, but we have to, this is not a string anymore. It's going to be this word type. So the cool thing about having a front end and a back end that are both in Next.js is I can use the same type on the front end and the back end. So I know that I'm expecting a word from the back end, and then I'm getting a word on the front end. I don't have to validate the data across both really, because I'm using the same data type on both sides. If you have separate frameworks with separate systems, you often have to create two sets of types essentially, or two models for your data, one on the back end, one on the front end. But we can use this single model because we're using the same framework for both. So we import our word. We're going to change this to word undefined. And now it's going to know that the response is supposed to be that. So first of all, we need to put this inside here. Response dot name. So I'm going to show the name of the word here. And then if it's false, I just want nothing. And then let's see if this works here. So we'll go back to our front end. And this is going to basically just do the same thing, react. Okay. Reaction. Next. So it's just showing the word right now, but every time I do that, if I look at my network here, action. If I click on this, I can see in my response that it's getting the word and it's getting all the definitions. So this is working. The other thing that's very important to note, and this is a huge reason why we do this all in the back end, the request that was made to the Merriam-Webster API, it doesn't show in our client-side network traffic. If we made this request here directly to Merriam-Webster, if someone is savvy enough to open this up and look at the network traffic, they can get your API key. Your API key will be exposed. There's no way around that when you're doing a client-side request. So instead, we're requesting our own internal server API, and it's totally hidden. In fact, they probably have no idea even which API we used. It all looks like it was done internally. So that's another very, very good reason to make external API calls from your own backend instead of from the front end. All right, so we're showing the word. Now I want to get the definitions presented. If I have more than one thing inside of here, we have to wrap it in something. We'll wrap it in a box. So we'll use the box as the outer, because you see if we have two different HTML elements, then it gives us grief. Sort of like when we return, we have to have it in a single thing. Okay, so now we're okay. Now I want to use lists to present this because lists have a lot of cool stuff. you see we can do all kinds of cool things. This is the one that I actually want to use here, which is, it has primary text and secondary text. So you can see primary text photo, secondary text the date. I want the primary text to be the definition and the secondary text to be the part of speech. Okay, so this is going to get really confusing here, but I'm going to map. Oh no, first I need to put a list around the outside. So take a list. We have to import that. Let's look at all the stuff we need to import. So let's import list. We need to import list item, and we need to import list item text. We don't need an avatar for now, or icons or anything. We could try to do that in the future, but for now we'll leave that out. Okay, so we have our list, and now inside of our list we need to map to list items. So inside of here we'll say response.definitions.map. And then we're going to map. Each of these is going to represent a single definition. And then the crazy thing is, inside of here, we actually have to map again. We have to nest our maps. And the reason is because we have definitions nested essentially inside of, if we look at this, we have these definitions nested inside of the outer definition. So we need to get all of those out. So how do we do that? So this represents this singular entry here like this. So we need to get the def.definitions. So I believe we can do this def.definitions.map. And then short def or something. Actually, what we should do is call this outer one definition and call this internal one def. Definition, oh my gosh. Definitions.map def. I don't know if it's going to like the way we're doing this. Probably not. Doesn't like that at all. Are we going to have to flatten this out before? We may have to flatten this out before we send it forward. Let's do that. Let's go back to our route. And instead of presenting our data like this, so if we go back to types, my definition is going to be a single string and a part of speech. Okay. So I think we're going to use for loops to make this easier to read. So if we think about this, the raw definitions, they had a different look. How can I show that again? That's okay. So what we're going to do is we will loop through for let I equal 0, I is less than raw defs dot length I plus plus. And then I'm going to have out here, we're going to say const definitions, which is going to be a type definition array. It's going to be an empty definition array, and it's going to be an empty array. Okay, now, yeah, I mean, so I don't like this nested mapping anyway, and it looks like React doesn't really like it either. So we'll take our definitions. Oh, we need to do another loop for let j equal 0, j is less than something, j plus plus. But the outer one is going to be, how did it look? And I'm going to have to redo this. Hold on. We're going to have to do it this real quick just to remember how this looks. Hold on, let me get rid of this junk. Okay, we're going to use the route. And we're going to change this to just return data instead, just so I can see it. Let's save this. There we go. Now we got the raw one again. So if we look at how the raw presents, we get the part of speech, and then we have the short defs. And those are the two things that we need. So I'll say const part of speech equals, we know that the raw defs is that type. So raw defs dot fl, sorry, raw def dot fl, wait. Raw, okay, so raw defs 0, no, raw defs, sorry, i.fl, there we go. Okay, so const part of speech equals raw defs i.fl, so that gives us the part of speech. And then we're gonna iterate through raw defs i.shortdef, j++. shortdef.length, j++, okay. Now we say definitions.append or push.push. It's not Python, so it's push. And then we're going to push the raw defs i.shortdef. Actually, we need to build it. So we'll say const definition equals, and it's going to be this right here, which is going to be a single definition of which will be a string and then a part of speech. So the part of speech is going to be this external part of speech. So we'll say part of speech, and then inside will be definition, and we can change this to a singular definition here. Definition is going to be raw defs i.shortdefj. Okay, so this should create a nice definition here out of this entire mess. And then we push that on definitions.push definition. Okay. And then we just return definitions. Oh no, we return name, which is going to be name, and definitions, which is going to be definitions. Then we go back to route. Get rid of this, and we're going to try this. And now this, yeah, look at that. There we go. Now it's presented very, very nicely. We have our array of definitions, each with their part of speech attached to a single definition. That's much, much better. Now we go back to page, and again, we don't have to update the type, which is nice. We'll go back to here, and we will simply map these definitions here. So it will be response.map, and it's going to be definition and I. Okay, and then inside of here, response. .definitions.map. Okay, list item, and we'll say key equals I, so that we don't get the hydration error. We have to make sure that we have independent keys. It's another reason I wanted to do this in a single map here. What I also could have done is created a function here that took that data, but I was like, why don't we get it cleaned up on the back end? That's the better way to do it. If the data doesn't present itself the way you want on the front end, it's much better to clean it up on the back end, do as much work on the back end as you can, and try to get it presented in the best way possible by the time it gets to the front end. So that's why I went and just fixed the map instead of adding a new mapping function here. That would have been very wasteful. All right, so list item, and then inside of the list item is going to be the list item text. Didn't I import that? Oh, I didn't import list item text. List item text, okay. And then that's a self-enclosing tag, and it has primary and secondary. So primary will be definition.definition, and secondary will be definition.part of speech. All right, here's the reveal. Let's see if this works. React. Oh my goodness, look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. I love when it works like that. So we've got our definitions with their parts of speech associated with each definition. Very, very cool. I wonder if I can number these. Am I able to number them? I don't know if I can number lists in here. Ordered list. Virtualized list. I don't think they have ordered. No, okay. That's fine. We'll just leave it like this. This is going to be more related to your project anyway. So I'll probably leave in all the stuff about how we resolved it, because I think it's a good demonstration of on-the-fly troubleshooting when you realize you have something that's not going to work how you want, like nested maps for that. It was going to be really gross if we did it that way. We would have to somehow count our index, and yeah, it would have been really bad. So getting the data presented in a way that we can use it on the front end is a much, much better option. All right, that's it for this one.